Crabbe, Journal 20. I spent altogether 2 nights, 1.5 days holed up, sleeping and thinking. When I finally came out, I found myself in a different world. Around me, the carved lines of great swooping snowdrifts threw shadows across the snow, softening the clear, bright morning light. Above, the sky was a hard, clear blue, and the air was cold. The bush was so quiet, I could hear my own breathing. I suppose an article. When I finally came out, I found myself in a different world. Around me, the carved lines of a great swooping snowdrifts threw shadows across the snow, softening the bright morning light. Above, the sky was a hard, clear blue, and the air was cold. The bush was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. I suppose an artist would have been thrilled to death with the pattern of shadow and dazzling white, the brittle branches against the blue sky. But me, I just stood there calculating how I was going to handle this latest wrinkle in the saga of Crabbe the Traveler. Where I stood, right outside my nest, now shaped like an igloo, I was hip deep in snow, and God only knew what was waiting for me further on. One thing was sure, I'd have to abandon the canoe. But soon I was packed up again, slogging through the snow. It was hard going, I'll tell you. In the places where the wind had got up some momentum during the storm, the snow was only knee-deep. But I had to plow through drift after drift as I went along, some deeper than my hips. I had to go around. Progress was very slow. By late afternoon, the sky was jammed up with low, ugly-looking clouds that came in on a freshening wind, a wind that came head-on against me. But I kept on, mostly out of frustration, in spite of the fading light and the unwelcome snow that began to sting my face. I repeated to myself, where the hell is that lake? I figured the most I had to cover that day was 3, maybe 4 miles. Yet here I was, still slogging. Though I was certain I was on course, I checked the compass every few minutes and even hauled out the map to double-check. Well, I was right. I reached the lake at nightfall, completely exhausted. I leaned against the trunk of a thick maple as I looked out over the ice, for the lake had frozen during the blizzard for as far out as I could see. My legs felt rubbery, and I panted from an attack on a hard-packed drift that swept up from the shore in a huge curve. As my breath returned, so did my common sense. I had reached the lake, but so what? I was still miles from nowhere and landbound. In the rapidly fading light, back to the wind, I squinted against the swirling snow. I checked the map. Ithaca Camp was the only place near, and it was a few miles northeast from where I was. Though probably closed for the winter, it would at least have shelter. I quickly dug some food out of the pack, stuffing my mouth with jerky. As I chewed, I took a final check of my clothing. This last leg was going to be rough. I would be traveling in the dark, and no light would come from that snowy sky. The wind was stronger here, slamming against the trees, tossing the branches which snapped and flashed in protest. The waving trunks groaned and squeaked eerily. I was wearing every article of clothing I owned, including the canvas pack coat, which was frozen stiff and crusted with ice and snow. My toque was yanked down across my brows and over my ears. My parka, inherited from Mary, was buttoned up tight, but I snugged the drawstring on the hood a little more. Hood and toque were stiff, rimmed with frozen breath. My hands felt okay in the mid socks, and my feet were only a little chilly. All systems go. I set out into the teeth of the wind without the pack. I couldn't carry the thing another step, so this trip was all or nothing. Why didn't I hole up again, as I should have? I'm not sure. Looking back, I think the reason was I felt so close. I was only a few miles from where I wanted to go, and I kept thinking, just a little farther, just a couple of hours, and I'd be out of the cold. Which wasn't sensible at all, of course. A couple of miles in a blizzard is a long, long way. I tried to stick to the shore of the lake because the land was fairly flat, and most of the drifts, though packed harder here, were only knee-deep or so. But Mommy Nature always makes you pay. Out of the bushment into the wind, which raced freely across the lake like a steel-cold demon, snatching away my body heat as I stumbled along. Eyes on either my compass or the few feet of snow in front of me. It was dark now. There was snow on the wind. Not much, but driven horizontally until the wind struck the trees on the rising shoreline and dropped its burden. I don't know how many times I fell before I lost my mitts. I fell forward in a deep drift and threw my arms out to break the fall. But the snow was deep, and I went in up to my shoulders, burying my face. I cursed and struggled in frustration, unable to push my way out, because my arms just kept plunging into the snow, nothing to push against. Finally, I managed to roll sideways, only to find that my mitts were lost in the drift and impossible to find in the dark. Snow was jammed way up my sleeves, and I had a hell of a time digging it out. It wasn't long after that my hands, which I tried to withdraw up the now snowy sleeves, developed a stinging sensation in them. The same sensation slowly invaded my feet. Then it went away. I thought with relief that I was beginning to warm up, since the pain was gone. Then a horrible thought struck me, and I tried flexing my fingers. They were very stiff. Then the toes, same thing. I realized with a shudder that they hadn't warmed up. The pain went away because the tissue was beginning to freeze. I really got scared then, and did something stupid. I began to run, but I didn't get very far before the run became a stagger, and I fell again, gulping in big mouthfuls of the frosty air. I was feeling cold all over now, and didn't rise. I didn't want to. I sat in the snow, drew my knees up to my stomach, and tucked my chin into my collar. Maybe I'll just sit and rest a while, I thought. My breathing became more regular. Boy, was I tired. I needed rest. I began to feel very comfortable. The cold was going away, and I felt less afraid. And then not afraid of all. Almost contented. You know, some people say reading is a waste of time, and maybe for them it is. But as I sat there watching tiny grains of snow dancing around in front of my face, I thought, this is just like a story I read by Jack London. Something about a fire. The guy in the story froze to death, but just before he drifted off, he lay down in a snowdrift hallucinating, waiting happily to fall asleep. Well, I didn't think I wanted to go to sleep, at least not yet. But as soon as the image of that poor fool crossed my mind, I struggled quickly to my feet. Hell, I almost fell for it. I ran my hands into my sleeves and pushed on, fighting the urge to run. I jammed my hands into my sleeves and pushed on, fighting the urge to run. It was an eternity, I remember telling myself, chanting, push. Crabbe, push. Don't quit after all this. I also remember praying, sort of, to Mary to help me just this one last time. It was right after that I broke through the ice and crashed shin deep into water that was so cold it seemed to burn. I was so excited I shouted, "I've made it!" in words that were immediately whipped away by the wind. I now knew I was at the mouth of that shallow river that had floated down at the very start of my journey. The one with the sandbar. On I charged, exhilarated, breaking through the ice all the way across the river and stumbling up the bank. In minutes I reached a cabin that was, luckily, unlocked. With wooden hands, I clumsily unlatched and pushed open the door. It took ages to fish my matches out of my pocket and to light one, since I could barely hold the box. In the dim light I saw a coal oil stove, bunk, sink, dresser. With the help of a second match, I found a stub of a candle. The thin linoleum crackled with the cold as I worked to get the stove alight. In no time, the small cabin began to feel the effects of the stove. Then I stripped off my outer clothing, let it drop and stay where it fell. After drying my feet in a blanket, I dragged the bunk closer to the stove and climbed in. I'm sure I smiled before I began to doze. But that smile didn't last long. Pain would not allow me to fall into sleep. Burning pain in my hands, feet, and face. I knew that was the frostbite withdrawing, and that there was nothing I could do but wait it out. I climbed out of the bunk after a few hours of half-sleep and turned the stove down. The room was stifling by now, the windows fogged. It was daylight, past noon by the look of the bright sun. Outside the cabin was a fantastically bright world of white. It hurt my eyes to look at it, and incredibly, melted snow dripped off the lee eaves of the cabin. I was still very weak, my legs shaky and my head light. It hurt to walk, but I was parched, so I found some old enameled pots under the sink and set about melting snow. I drank and drank, coughing all the time. The warm liquid set me off. My chest hurt deep down. I lay on the cot again, soaking in the warmth, the beautiful warmth I could almost touch it. I continued to doze. By the end of the day, my face and feet were okay. My right hand was much better, too, a bit stiff but clearly fine. My left hand was in deep trouble, though. The pinky and ring fingers were swollen up like ugly yellow-brown sausages, and the skin had begun to split. Anything that touched them set off ragged waves of pain throughout the hand and up my arm. Then I made tea, dusty brown stuff I found on a shelf, and hung my clothes by the stove. It was nip and tuck, one-handed funneling. The other thing that worried me was my chest. It was still sore and hurt like hell when I coughed. The next morning I pulled on my clothes and shut off the stove. Since I had no mitts, I tore strips from one of the wool blankets and wrapped my hands. Clumsy, but all right. The left I wrapped especially carefully until it looked like I was carrying a huge red club. It was tough going to the main road. The snow was wetter with the warmer weather and hard to slug through. I began to hitchhike and saw my first car pretty soon. It swooshed past, throwing up a great cloud of snow. Shortly afterward, a bright, clean pickup stopped for me. The driver had to lean across and open the cab door for me as I fumbled at the outside handle, with my blanket in hand. With difficulty, I clambered up and shut the door. "Got to put on your belt before I take off," said the driver. He was a big, heavy guy, dressed in a red and green checkered bush shirt, denim overalls, and a wool hunting cap. He was friendly-looking, with fat cheeks and a W.C. Fields nose. It seemed strange to hear his voice, the only human, other than Mary, I had heard in months. I struggled with the seatbelt buckle for a bit, and he leaned over to help, after slamming the gear shift lever into park. "Some blizzard, eh?" he said as he drove off. "Heard on the news this morning it's been the worst in 20 years. "Yeah," I answered. "Pretty bad." "We got the roads plowed through, though. Worked all last night. I drive a plow." "Oh," I said. He kept looking over at me. "Something wrong with your hand?" he asked. "Yeah, frozen, I think," I said, trying not to sound dramatic. "Better have a look," he said as he pulled the truck over to the roadside. "Don't want to fool around with frozen fingers." I couldn't unwrap it, so he did. "Jesus Christ," he explained when he saw the two yellowy fingers. "What's happened? That's bad?" His eyes were bugging out of his face. Before I could answer, he said excitedly, "We got to get you to a doctor." He rammed the truck into gear and tore away, fishtailing on the slippery road. Soon we were speeding along, slipping and sliding. I had visions of being wrapped around a tree in a metal envelope, or buried forever in the huge banks of snow that lined the road. "Don't worry," my good Samaritan almost shouted. "You'll be okay." I didn't feel okay. I was coughing like mad. Every cough a sharp jab, but he was the only excited person in the pickup. He reached over his head and flipped a switch, then unclipped the hand mic. He set a stream of stuff into the thing, but I couldn't understand the weird mixture of words and numbers. I recognized 10-4 from TV shows, though I wondered if he was really serious when he called the doctor a sawbones. We ripped into town at a furious pace. I ran a red light, barreled past a big stone church, and pulled around a corner. Slid is the proper word. Onto a side street lined with spruce and stopped in front of a big rambling frame house with a wide veranda. A sign hung over the steps. My chauffeur jumped out, slammed the door, and ran up the steps. He came back, hiked his portly body into the cab, made a skidding U-turn, and got back on the CB as we tore through town. Hanging up the mic, he explained that the doc was at the clinic about 100 miles south in Huntington. That's where we were going. "Don't worry, kid. I'll get you there," he added confidently in a kind voice. "Don't hurry on my account," I said weakly, hoping to slow this headlong flight. "Gotta make tracks," he answered. "Can't fool around with frozen fingers." We were on the highway now, and the motion made me drowsy. I dozed a little. I awoke to find myself being carried by that hulking character through sliding glass doors and down a long hall. I was so weak, I didn't protest. I looked into his frowned face. The guy really looked concerned about a stranger. He took me into a big room and laid me on a table. "Thanks," I murmured as he stepped out of sight. 3 women in white stood around me, and one began to unwrap my hand. One gave orders in a quiet voice. When my hand was unwrapped, they all went silent, but only for a minute. Then I felt a needle.